Welcome to All Up in My Lady Business. I am your host, Mary Nisi. On this podcast, I'll explore the fine line between having it together and losing your shit. Here I share my journey as an entrepreneur, a mom, a wife, a DJ, and randomly a beekeeper. I have no shame and no filter, except the ones I use on Instagram. My stories of resilience, a little structure, and a lot of resourcefulness can show you how to take those same things and live your life with your whole ass. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I have Ashley Quinto Powell, who is a serial entrepreneur and national speaker. She is the author of Executive Motherhood, The Art of Having It All Without Doing It All, and the founder of the virtual assistant agency, MyVARocks. She's spoken about motherhood for TEDx, Anita B. Org, and the University of Chicago's Polsky Center, amongst many others. She lives in Madison, Wisconsin with her husband and her children, of which she has 2 of them.
Yep.
Ashley, thank you so much for being on All Up in My Lady Business.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Ashley, why don't you give us a little bit of your background? Are you from Wisconsin originally? Were you born with a cheese head on your head?
No, I wasn't born with a cheese head on my head. I was raised in Chicago. I'm a city girl. It was actually really, really important to my identity that I was a city girl. Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure that I owned sneakers particularly. I'm not sure why that makes me a city girl, but I was like a hail a cab person. I was didn't have a driver's license person, very specifically not from the suburbs. It was from Boys Town.
You're from Boys Town?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's where you were born and raised in Boys Town.
We moved to Chicago when I was 6, but for the next glorious 20 years, I lived in Boys Town.
So did you go to like CPS and?
No, I went to Latin.
Oh, so we're a smarty pants.
Well, I'm not sure that I would say that. I think I bucked the trend there, but I was really lucky to go to Latin.
Yeah, that's an amazing school.
When I was in Chicago, there were only 3 private schools. Now there are an actual bajillion private schools, and I can't imagine how difficult that would be to navigate. We just looked at the 3.
It was an impossible thing to navigate, which is why I am now, ding, 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 living in the suburbs. So basically, you were from Chicago, and then how long were you here?
I was there until I was, I think, 26. I had this cute little apartment on Addison. It was like the world's cutest apartment. And if you smashed your face against the glass, on one side you could see the lake, and on the other side you could see Wrigley Field, but a sliver. Yeah, so I paid a lot for the view.
Yeah, exactly. Did you go to school here?
Well, I went to Denver and then DePaul. So yeah, I went to. Denver was a bad fit for me because I didn't. I'm a slightly different person now, but I wasn't into the outdoors or marijuana, and if those 2 things don't line up, you're not a great fit for early 2000s Denver.
Yeah, and so you would. I am also a blue demon.
Amazing.
I went to DePaul as well.
I love also that it's the blue demon and not the blue demons.
Mm-hmm. It's because it's a Catholic school. There's only one devil, as far as they're concerned.
It's because the DePaul basketball team just had a D, and so they were the D men.
That's right. Way to make it gendered. Way to make it so that there's not the D men and the D woman.
No.
So when I went to DePaul, so I would have classes that were taught by Vincentians.
Yep.
Priests would be speaking. And they made it very clear, I would have a Catholic priest teaching me a class. I remember I took a class called The Bible is Literature that was taught by a priest. And they were very into being Catholic in roots and tradition, but not in... They didn't really push the Catholicism down your throat. In fact, I many times forgot that it was even a religious school. But I remember there was the priest was teaching the class, and he's like, okay, so Jesus is dead and gone. And I'm like, isn't your entire life based on the idea that Jesus is still kicking it? And he's like, yeah, he basically implied to me that he was gay, and that's the reason why he was a priest. And I was
wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It was, but it wasn't like he was an out gay person. He basically was like, I'm gay, I'm Catholic. I didn't have any options. So I became a priest. And so even though I'm a priest, I've got more diverse I'm willing to accept that Buddhism and, Islam and other things are just as valid as Christianity. And I was like, look at this. It kind of opened up a whole different way of looking at the clergy, and also just kind of sad that he had to become a priest as a gay person because he did.
That's awful.
That's what a lot of priests were they just not out gay guys that needed a place to be.
Gay for repression.
Okay, so what did you go to DePaul for?
Business. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I figured I really wanted to make money, so business.
And what did you do with it after you graduated?
Well, when I was at DePaul, I was working full time and going to school full time, which I actually, maybe I was 3/4 time, but it was so good for me because instead of when I was in Denver, I was in more of a traditional, I was in a sorority. I was the president of that sorority. I was really involved in the social life. And then when I was at DePaul, I was focused on working. And then that made the lessons from the business stuff really, really relevant and really interesting.
What were you doing for a job? Was it a thing where you were I'm retail, or were you?
No, I was a property manager. I managed rental properties. And that's actually how I got into sales, because my family, until I was 15, lived in one of their buildings. We had this great apartment on Roscoe. And when I was in high school, they hired me to show the apartments in that building on Saturdays when they would have open houses. And they couldn't find an adult, a real live adult, to do it because it was so boring. You had to sit in a room and then wait for someone to show up for an open house and then enthusiastically show them the apartment. Well, for a high school student, that's perfect. I mean, I sat there and did homework. I was paid to do homework. And then someone showed up and I was like, oh my gosh, here is someone who's going to think that I am 20. And I was shown this apartment.
Your parents owned rental properties?
No. We lived in the rental property.
Oh, okay. So you worked for the company that owned the building.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So that was your first job. And what's amazing, it's just to think back and there being a time when apartment rentals were there were so many of them that they could have an open house and someone may or may not show up and you're begging people to move in. Now it's basically the same thing as buying a house. It's there's people trying to it's terrible. Anyway, so you did that in high school, and then you continued to do that throughout college?
Yeah, I did that for 8 years, and I started as a part-time leasing assistant, I think was my title. And then I moved my way up to sales manager and property manager. And then it was a family-owned business, but not my family. They were lovely people, but I was, that was I had invented my path. And then it was just very clear that I was not, there wasn't more things for me to conquer. And anyway, my mom wanted to start an online jewelry business. By that time, she and I had both bought into separate co-ops. So we owned apartments that we sold and then moved to Wisconsin. We had a lake home in Lake Geneva. So I sold my little apartment. She sold her bigger apartment. We moved to the lake house and started this little business together.
You and your mom did?
Yeah. My mom was the coolest.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And was she making her own jewelry, or was she drop ship? Was she?
No. We are a crafty people, but we're not the make things and we're just not that. That's just not at all. No, we were importing it. She had a bunch of contacts in Asian manufacturing, and so we bought gigantic, outlandish costume
lots.
Jewelry.
Would you buy them by the piece, or would you buy lots?
We would buy lots.
And so then you would just repackage them as your brand and then sell them?
Yep.
How old were you when you started doing that?
At 26.
That's amazing. So you and your mom go into business. What was the company called?
It's so mortifying. It was called Ashley's Big Secret, which actually, if you look up now, is exactly what you think it is. And I have often thought, if we did go into sex toys, Mom and I, we would still be in business. But it was right before people were really buying fashion online. And so to be the whole, it was a flop. I lost so much money. They came out of that whole experience. with nothing but debt. And it had put my mom and I, we were in couples therapy. Like, it was really awful.
Wow. But here's the thing. It sounds, I mean, honestly, debt and couples therapy with your mom sounds terrible. But I have to imagine that you learned so much from that experience.
Totally. I mean, it did the like main positive is that it got me into tech because my job was to build the website and the back end. And we had this really beautiful back end inventory and e-commerce system. And we were doing kitting and bundling before anybody else was really doing kitting and bundling. And that's where, like you say, oh, I love this necklace. Well, then the website will suggest, how about these earrings that match? And
When you came up, like you kind of what year was this?
It would have been 2007.
Oh, so this is very early on in like
super early. Yeah.
So you created an algorithm that would suggest things once you chose something?
Yeah.
And you invented that. Had you seen that idea elsewhere and then replicated it, or did you?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of using open source software. Open source software is like the best thing ever. And actually, the software development firms that I went on to work for in business development after closing my business, always focused on starting with open source software. It's such a good place to start. And then what you do is you have access to free code.
To a dingbat like myself that doesn't understand what open source coding is, what is that? Can you give like a little Reader's Digest of what that means?
Sure. So there are huge, huge libraries of, hey, here's some code that does a thing. If you want it, you just copy and paste it and you can modify it. And
what is it? What are things it can do?
I mean, well, okay.
I'm real dumb when it comes to this stuff.
No. All right. So let's say you are trying to make an app that has a carousel of photos in the middle.
Okay. All right.
The code to make that carousel is probably like slightly more complicated than you would want to come up with on your own. And so you would just search on, one of the libraries and find, okay, this section is something that I can copy and paste and put in my own code, and it will have that. And you can modify it, and usually it's maintained beautifully.
That's so cool. So that you take the carousel and it's like, but I want the border to be orange. So you like type in code to make it orange.
Yep.
And then you can type a code to make it so that it's got like the ability to have like GIFs or boomerangs or whatever. Like you can. Okay. All right. So thank you for that. So there's libraries that exist of this open source code where you can so you took open source code chunks to then modify and create your own website that had an algorithm built inside of it so that if you like this necklace, you probably also will like these earrings.
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
It was really early. I think you would have a hard time like hopping in to that now because I had nothing but time. I had just quit my job. I had just sold my apartment. It's like, I think someone can do this. Why, it should be me. And anyway, I feel like I'm a pretty smart person, or you're a pretty smart person. You could have figured it out too if you sat down in a basement in Wisconsin with a computer and just started.
And also fighting with your mom. So, but I guess the other thing is like it's interesting that you say this. I've never heard of what you just said, and it might just be showing my age more than anything. But on the other side of it, I just feel like women in tech. That's like the idea of someone saying, "Hey, Mary, you could do." I mean, I can do anything because I can do anything. Like anybody can do anything if they put their minds to it. But like there are things that in the episode we did with Jessica Hopper, we were talking about how it's hard to see there's not many women in bands at the time when we were coming up, and it's like because we just didn't see a lot of women in bands. Yeah, representation matters. So did you find were you the only girl amongst a bunch of guys, or did you have a bunch of girls that were also into coding and tech and stuff? How did that even become a thing you figured you could do?
I think hubris was how I figured out I could do it.
Beautiful.
Hubris alone, and honestly, it got me into tech. That was a really good thing that came out of it. But all of the learning was around how little I actually knew. At some point, someone should have said, hey, Ashley and her mom. So fun fact, you don't have any retail experience. Also, you don't know anything about merchandising or tech. So maybe thinking about it, you should go with something instead of having to figure out literally everything. Everything needed an experiment. And so it was hard to I think looking back, we never would have been successful because everything was an experiment and everything was on this like hope and
Moxie.
confidence that it would be, absolute moxie. And we do like big jewelry. We still like big jewelry. Both of us really get a lot of compliments on the like the outlandish way we accessorize. But those were not the things that translated into a business. Actually, so you see this in startup all the time. We are so excited to see young people who are like in college or right out of college disrupting existing industries. We think that that is so great, but there's a real flaw in that. We're allowing people who don't have industry experience to come in and be so confident that what they're going to do is going to be helpful, but they just don't have the knowledge that they need. So, now when I interact with startup founders who are like young and have no experience and are so ready to make a huge impact, I'm like, oh baby, sweetheart, I think you need to go work for somebody for 20 years. And then I was totally traumatized by entrepreneurship. Like I knew when I came out of that, I got a job at a big IT consulting firm after I closed my business. And my main lesson was I will never work for someone else. Someone else will always have to guarantee that my paycheck shows up in my bank account every Friday. You're going to be responsible for that. I'm not going to be responsible for that. I'm just going to always work for someone else. And I did that for a long time. I did that for 10 years.
So basically, when you came out, when you guys closed the thing, you closed the business.
Yep.
You were lots of debt. You clearly repaired your relationship with your mom because you said she's the coolest.
Yeah.
So
couples therapy is very effective.
But you're good. You're like, everything's fine. And then, so you just closed it.
Yep.
And then when you moved on to the big IT company, was it like, did they look at the website and your jewelry thing and be like, oh, she clearly knows what she's doing, I'm going to hire her? Like, how did you transition from owning the website to working at the IT company?
Well, I had sales experience for being a property manager and a sales manager. And so really I was hired for sales, and sales is, young people can always get sales jobs because they pay absolutely nothing, and you can scramble your way forward. And that's what I did. I mean, it was tough. We were in the middle of a recession. I was calling into enterprise companies and saying, hey, would you like a very expensive IT consultant to work on your enterprise resource planning systems? Sure, like, they're like Oracle,
your Salesforce.
Yeah. And at the time they were like laying off their entire IT departments and saying, I don't understand why you're calling me, because I clearly don't have any money and you're just barking up the wrong tree. And that happened for every company that I called. I was really lucky to have landed in consulting because temporary workforces do better in recessions. So all of the freelancers, all of the independent consultants, they always do better in a recession. As companies are laying off permanent staff, they still have to do the work. So they will. So, and I say that because now so much of my network is in consulting, and my business is in virtual assistants. We represent a temporary workforce, and that can feel really risky, or that can feel like you're sort of living on the edge. But when a recession comes, like, it is our time, because we're a contingent workforce, just does much better when the rest of the world is unstable.
And so how did you get to the point where you created MyVARocks? Like how did that happen?
Well, I had gone through I worked for a very big corporation, and then I worked for 8 or 10 years, and then I worked for much, much smaller firms. And the lesson in that was that they were really good people and they treated their employees really fairly and really, really well. And the thing about other people being in control of your paycheck is that they can always fuck it up too. You're not the only one who can fuck it up. Like, they can just decide on a whim that you're fired, or they can decide on a whim that, like, oh, it's a mistake, or, oh, we don't actually think you deserve this commission that you worked so hard for. There's like all sorts of stuff that can happen. And some people just are entrepreneurs. And I'm one of those people, I was like I always had a little side hustle. I always had, as a kid, even I had a dog walking business, or I made bank walking dogs in downtown Chicago as like an 8th grader. And, and my last corporate job, I was keeping a notebook of all of my business ideas, and I was going back and forth from Chicago. And I really thought, I have like a neat opportunity to see what's going on in Chicago and bring it to Madison. And at some point I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I know what I'm going to do. We're going to open up a nail salon. And it's going to be right on Madison's Capitol Square. And, we'll do it. It'll be on a subscription basis, because that was like just starting for nails in Chicago. And by that time, of course, everyone has learned a lot of lessons. And my mother would say like, hey, okay, great idea. Truly a wonderful plan. But just because, you don't have any like retail experience or really know anything about nails or
is this post jewelry company?
Way post jewelry.
Wow.
Company.
So she's like, you learned nothing. You learned nothing from our experience. Like, are you going to go to beauty school, get like nail tech school and learn how to put on some tips? No.
It wasn't like my best idea. I mean, I think that, that is now in Madison and thriving, and doing really well. But, no, I had a notebook of business ideas, and I first left corporate to come on as co-founder of a wedding registry for art. And then because both of my kids were in private school, my husband stayed at home, and I was the sole breadwinner, which is a perfect time, by the way, to go out of corporate and on your own.
Yeah.
I consulted small software development firms just to keep money coming in. And then I didn't actually love being the CRO of a wedding registry, and I did love consulting.
What does the R stand for?
A revenue.
Okay.
It's okay. Tech does all sorts of weird stuff. So
Chief Revenue Officer?
Yeah. It's your chief salesperson, or your chief, the person who does your go-to-market strategy and builds out your sales team.
All right.
Yeah.
You've coasted through many C-suites.
Yep. It's almost like I'm a young man in a polo shirt.
I mean, it's almost like you're a man. What does that feel like?
Ooh. It's good. We need to dive into that, because that is not even close.
Sorry, you were talking. So you're like, I was going to start a nail salon, but then I pivoted.
Yeah. And the one that I really did leave my job over was a wedding registry for art. And then I consulted. And then in the middle of the pandemic, I could see a couple of things. One, we were overburdening women with all of the administrating school and holding full-time jobs. And I would get on the Zoom, just networking. I would get on the Zoom with these women, and we were dying. We were literally dying. There was so much coming at us, and we were responsible for so much, and no one was saying, this is not sustainable. We need to offer more help, or, instead people were quitting. And, I think it's so important to keep women in the workforce. And I have been thinking so much about how close we were really getting close. In February of 2020, we were on the precipice of changing the way business operates because of how close to parity we were. And then all of a sudden we were sliding backwards so rapidly. Wait
a minute. What do so you're saying in February 2020, what was happening that made you think that we were hitting parity?
We were just getting super close. I mean, we were and my metrics are a little wonky. We now had more women than people named John on the list of Fortune 500 CEOs. That was a big one for us, because for a long time it was more people named John than women combined. And we were really, from my perspective, we were changing the way business was getting done. Business was starting to be more empathetic. Business was more collaborative. It was less, I will slaughter my competition just for the hell of it, and more, more people had an abundance mindset. You even saw this with men and the way that they were operating. And then we were sliding backwards so rapidly. And I saw a business opportunity to scoop up talent that was going to drop out of the workforce. Because if it was me, if it was me going from being a thriving business person who also has children to a stay-at-home mom, my brain would atrophy. I would be miserable.
Yeah.
I mean, I love my children. I don't want to be home alone with them, or they don't want just me to interact. The whole thing was.
No. I mean, I do believe, I mean, it's an interesting concept. Because, you get, like, I personally, like, I love my child to pieces, and I could not be a stay-at-home mom.
No.
I couldn't do it. And it's just, I personally, I love my kid, but no one asks the man they're never like, must suck for you to have to go to work for 9 hours a day. Like, no one even questions that a man's going to go to work, and there's going to be, and it's like, and I'm seen as a bad person or something because I don't know. It's, but along the same, whatever, it's kind of a dusty argument at this point, but that's amazing though that you recognize, because I mean, there were so many think pieces that were going around 3-4 months into the pandemic, like, labor is going to have a woman problem. Women are fleeing the workforce in droves. And it's like, we're not fleeing. This isn't a voluntary, like, we're not all like, oh, thank God there's a disease floating around so I can finally be home with my family, all of them, all at the same time. Like, that's exactly what I wanted. Because as much as like, and I do sort of look fondly back on the very beginning of the first couple of months of the pandemic when we were all kind of home together and like,
cozy.
I got to see what it was like for my son to be at school, and I was able to catch things that the teachers weren't catching, that I was able to kind of, because my son's autistic, and I had to kind of, he got diagnosed around that time. So like, I wasn't really like at school, they're like, he's doing really well. And it's like, but he's doing really well in the therapeutic environment he was in, not necessarily in real world ways. So I was able to, anyway, there were good things that came out of that time, but women leaving the workforce is not the great thing. And, not having things in place to make it easier to get through that was also problematic. So you see women who are very highly capable leaving their jobs because they have to. And how did you manage to put your golden lasso around? I guess that's the lasso of truth. I guess you know what I'm trying to say. How did you figure out?
Well, so
what were you doing at the time when this, like, because you hadn't started MyVARocks at this point, had you?
No, I hadn't, but I was counseling businesses in an agency model. So my consulting has always been around when the founder is doing the sales and the work. There's a really good constraint in there for me that it tends to be like a very, very expensive engagement with, from my clients to their clients. There's a high degree of trust, and the difficulty again of having to do all of the sales and then turn around and do all of the work. And what tends to happen is that those businesses are in these really ugly feast famine cycles, or, they'll always scrambling, or it always feels like you're behind. That's just the challenge that I love to tackle. And as part of that, I had said so many times, like, all right, I'm looking at your business and looking at everything you're doing. And unless you want to work 120 hours a week, you need to find someone who can handle some of this stuff for you. And so I was recommending that people hire VAs and referring people to my VAs. And for a long period, I would say like, oh, Mary, you need a VA. How about you work with Crystal, who's my VA? She's great and you're going to love her, and I'll set you up. And then at some point, inevitably, Crystal would really get going with you and say like, oh, Ashley, it has been so fun working with you. Now Mary needs me full time, so I can't work with you anymore. And I would get dumped by my virtual assistants. And so I had to keep this stable of referrals. And I did that. I did the stable of referrals thing for like a year, including actually pre-pandemic. And then...
And were these VAs working for other people?
Yeah. They would work like for themselves, or they just ended up being like essentially networking contacts. And I had, and consulting is staffing. So I had sort of been in staffing firms and consulting firms. And I thought on a whim, I'll just figure out if this can be done. And I was talking to this brilliant woman who was a client of mine on the consulting side at the time. And I said, this is something that I'm thinking of doing. Here's how it might work. And her name is Amanda Moriucci. She's the Denver Tech CEO of the Year in 2021. She's just a brilliant woman. And she said, I love it. I'll be your first client. And I was like, that's great. And she was like, no, really, take my credit card information. I want to be your first client. And
meaning you were going to find a VA for her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And without her saying that and being so enthusiastic, I'm not sure it would have happened at all. And so I put together my first couple of clients, and the rest is history.
And that was 2020?
That was 2021.
Your business is less than a year old?
We are a year and a half old. We are just coming up on 18 months.
My gosh, you operate like a company that's been around for like 80 years.
Thank you so much.
Not 80 years. 80 years sounds gross.
I would take
8. You look like you've got like 8 solid years under your belt. You're having your 10th anniversary or whatever it is. That's very cool. So a year and a half, you're only a year and a half into this. So clearly it's working. Clearly it's banging along.
It's a solid model. I think it's the right time. And there are things at play. It's just the things that I've been thinking about for a decade in, how we help women. I mean, we've been like, we looked at our moms who were told basically like, you can have it all. You just also have to not neglect anything that you were responsible for before. So if you want to work, awesome. Like we're totally a big fan of that, but you're still going to cook and you're still going to clean. And you're still going to do all the laundry, but like, good luck. Like, yes.
And when you don't do all that stuff, you're going to feel like you're being shamed and you're going to have guilt for not being able to pull off all the household stuff. And the problem there is, I mean, as woke and as like equitable as our husbands or our partners, we want to and my husband he does a lot of stuff to do, but like he was raised on a model that my mother-in-law worked as well. But I mean, and my mom worked as well too, but it's like our mom still did the lion's share of the cooking and the cleaning, et cetera. And so their children also saw that. And we watched our moms kind of struggle with trying to have it all and still do the things. Mm-hmm. And then we're also trying to do it, but we're doing it with way less time. Like, I don't think that, because my mom, I have to care about shit my mother never had to carry about. Like, I had 5 brothers and sisters that were like babysitters. So my mom never had to like worry about where I was or if I was okay. I was in Nebraska. No, like, and it's like, if I can't not have a cleaning lady. I love cleaning. I truly, or at least I think I love cleaning. Do I love cleaning, or is it just a thing I've always had to do? It's like a cleaning lady, like I've taken my laundry and have somebody else do it because I don't have time to do it myself. Like there's just, it's having it all, like you said, like you can have it all, but just like not all at the same time.
Right. Or you ask for help. And I think the thing that's so troubling for me in like watching gender in business is that we tend to look at very, very high performing women. So women with more kids than I have. I have 2, but it feels like 5 because they have big personalities. But like people who actually have 5 children and are on boards and hold high level positions and contribute to their communities in meaningful ways. We look at that and we tend to say like, oh, you don't know how to say no. That's your problem. You need to learn how to say no. And you need to, dial back what you're doing. And, oh, are you making sure that you have time to spend with your children? Are you making sure that you have time for yourself? We ask all of these things and we question how she can possibly, in good conscience, spend this much time doing this much stuff. And that is absolutely the wrong question to be asking. If you see someone taking on a lot of tasks, the ideal response to that is, how can I help? You see a woman carrying a lot of bags going into a building, you open the GD door. You don't say like, how silly of you to take one trip.
Well, yes, but I find, but on the other side of that is when you offer that help, we don't know how to accept the help either, because it's almost like accepting the help is also has its own problems within it. Like, no, I can handle it. Like I was doing a wedding last weekend and there was a mom that was like in the bathroom and she was like nursing one child while another kid was running around and she was trying to grab a drink and I like went to go get it and give it to her. She's like, that's okay. I got it. And it's like, no, you don't, woman. Baby. Like, just let me give you a drink. It sucks that we are in a position where we feel like if we accept help, we're seen as failures. If we ask for help, we're seen as failures. The bumper sticker that says like, you've got the same 24 hours in the day that Beyonce has. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, we don't. I don't have the same amount of time. Beyonce has like 3 nannies. Beyonce.
She started with 0 nannies. Like, so that particular phrase used to really make me like twitchy mad because that's a ridiculous thing to say. But like, frankly, it is true. We do all have the same 24 hours. She is great at having 3 nannies, but isn't that just being great at delegating? Like, isn't that just being great at acknowledging that if she's going to be Beyonce, she also cannot be vacuuming. She also cannot be making sure that everyone has all of their snacks because she's fucking Beyonce. Well, you're Mary Niecy. I'm Ashley Quinto Powell. Like, I don't have time to be doing this stuff because I'm Ashley Quinto Powell. It's it can be the same thing, but we look at the Beyonce example in particular as being like outlandish. But I built my business on the idea that it's not outlandish. You are doing a lot of stuff. You need someone who will open the door. You need someone who will say, "Hey, it looks like you have 17 stories worth of packages in your arms. How about I take the top 3 stories of those back?" You just need so
basically, you're Beyonce's help.
For sure,
basically what you are.
I would love to be.
You are the help that can turn somebody into the Beyonce of their business.
Yeah, absolutely.
That should be on your bumper sticker.
It should be my bumper sticker. I think on both sides of the equation of a virtual assistant, you have potentially a woman who needs to take a step back from the traditional workforce and needs a way to stay vital and stay relevant. And she becomes a VA for a woman who is trying to do a lot of things and is ready to ask for help that will make her who she is supposed to be and who will enable her to do all the things that she is supposed to do.
When you are looking, so on the hiring side, when you're trying to find the person who's going to be working for you, like as one of your VAs, like, is it a thing where it's just like a menu of options? You've got one VA that can do this and another VA that can do that. So you don't could somebody have like multiple VAs within your company working for them? Or is there one VA that takes the lead and then they kind of delegate down?
You need a really good relationship in a virtual assistant. Like, you have to spend the time to get really close to someone. And that person has to know how you like to communicate and how to get in front of you. One of the first challenges that we face with a client is that they tend to, if somebody has been pushing a business forward on their own for years, and this is the first time they're asking for help, it just always happens that at some point they say, just this last time, it's probably easier if I just do it myself. Like, it's such a huge effort to like teach someone to do this. I'll just continue doing this. And they disappear for a little bit. And at this point we can sense it and we know exactly what to do, but we know that is coming because that's how everybody has gotten where they're going. And so I think we're just slightly better at solving for that moment than other folks. And I think that's really so you need that primary relationship in order to solve for that kind of issue and to be comfortable. And, the relationship between a client and a VA just has so much trust that you can have a whole stable of people, but the way that we have it modeled is your primary VA can always bring in help, and they can always say like, oh, you know what we need for this is a graphic designer. A graphic designer would really make this PowerPoint presentation shine. So we'll bring in the graphic designer for a little bit. And we do a lot of training in the background on like project management.
I'm pretty good at reading people's minds. Like, I'm pretty good at like figuring out exactly what people need within seconds. And that's a superpower that I think that people who do sales, and I think entrepreneurs in general, you're trying to solve for a problem. And that's,
yes,
and I feel like that would be the thing. And it is the thing that's always been the hardest with when I brought on like employees in support situations is like, I assume everyone can read my mind.
Yeah.
And that never happens. Like, it's not a realistic ask, and it's also not a realistic expectation. And then it winds up creating friction. So how do you deal with that kind of, because I'm assuming that all entrepreneurs are exactly like me.
I think a lot about the energy as I'm making matches, and we just happen to do it where I make the matches. I love putting people together. Like, it is networking. The way that I network is always like, oh, Mary, you know who you need to meet is my friend Jane, and you two are going to hit it off and you're going to do some business together and it's going to be great. So I really like to put people together, but I think about, the skills, the like primary skill sets need to match up. But also the energy level needs to match up. The tolerance for risk should match up. And I think mostly when something goes wrong, it ends up being the tolerance for risk being mismatched. And
Can you explain that better?
Sure. Okay. So if you are nervous and you are letting someone into your business for the first time, you want someone who is going to check in, make sure things are okay. I'll say like, all right, I'm just getting started on this project. Is this what you were thinking about? Okay. How about now? Is this what you thought you were looking for? Okay. What modifications should I make? That's very comforting to you if you have a low tolerance for risk. But if your tolerance for risk is higher, that sort of interaction will really upset you. You'll say, they have no idea what they're doing. They can't do anything without direct intervention from me. This is just not going to work. And so in that case, you need someone who is a VA who is very comfortable, like just doing it. I don't like it. They'll use their best judgment and they'll do their best. And then we'll come back later and say, okay, this wasn't quite right, but we got something out. And those two, the VA that serves one can't serve the other. And it's really, really subtle. I would say also, the pace that people move. I move at a pretty fast pace. So I can't have someone who's methodical working on my account. Methodical is definitely good. All VAs should probably have, have some semblance of plodding along and making sure that things look right. But I'm like 7 steps ahead and annoyed that you're all the way back there, making sure that like there were no typos. Like, there will be typos. Yeah. Let's keep going.
Yeah. We can fix those in post.
Right.
So then when you're looking on the client side, who's like the most ideal client to like take this? Because that's another side of this is like, you've got the VAs that you're trying to place, but then who are your favorite types of clients? Like the kind of people that come to you and you really thrive with having a VA?
It's such a good question. And, part of the equation for me is making sure that we have the clients that are doing interesting stuff to keep these incredible VAs challenged and excited. But I really look for folks who are doing impact-driven work. We have what I would claim is a much higher percentage of companies focused on DEI work than other firms. Like, we really, I wouldn't be surprised if 30% of our clients were involved in DEI consulting in some way.
That's diversity, equity, and inclusion for anybody who's unaware.
Yep. We have great clients who do that. So that's a good sign. But really, if somebody is overwhelmed and they can see possibilities, we've just gone through this great rebranding and we're getting a whole new website and all new stuff with Rachel K. Albers, who, if you have not met her, she is a marketing muckraker. And she's a feminist troublemaker. She is the best. Yeah, no, she's really awesome. And one of the things that she helped me identify is that all of the VA firms have colors that are blue and green, and they're very calming. They are very specifically focused on like, listen, you have a lot going on. We will take it off your plate so that you can take a deep breath and go on vacation and spend time with your children. And all of that is wonderful stuff. And it's definitely a goal. My colors are orange, and we're like, oh no, strap in. Like, we are doing this. So if our clients can see, it's so much more than being overwhelmed. It is seeing the possibility. We have gotten this far and now we just can't get farther. My business can't grow until I have someone who can help, but they see what's beyond it. And our VAs are really great at, they have great business acumen. They're empowered to be opinionated and to say, hey, all right, here, I understand what your goals are for the quarter. And I see other clients doing their email lists like this. What if we tried that? Or, hey, you have me organizing your Google Drive, but that's way different than the goal that you have of having me make a better customer onboarding experience for you. So how about I switch gears? And that's the kind of help that those folks need. It is much more proactive. It is, it is like all hands on deck. We are rolling up our sleeves. We are not waiting around for someone to tell us what to do. And I think that's a really critical piece.
Is it a lot of women that work for you? Like, do you have any dudes?
I do have dudes. Yeah, I have some really great dudes.
And so I guess that was just a random question.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to, so it's like, it's interesting to have a business where it's VAs. And this is like, I mean, because everybody needs these. Like everybody could use a VA. It's like having a therapist. Like everybody could use somebody else to kind of help them with these things. And the idea of having a growth model built within it, where you're empowering the VAs to like actually make themselves an asset to this particular person. They're not interchangeable. It's not just this person's drafting your emails and somebody else could be doing it too. And so what's the growth model for the people who are working for you as well? Like they're not just going to stay. I mean, what's the, starting with the end in mind, like where do you want them to go? Like being a year and a half into this business, you've got, a lot ahead of you.
Well, I thought for sure that what would happen in my business is we would have a lot of turnover. As it turns out, we don't have very much turnover. The people that we really like stay with us for a really long time. But I'm having really open conversations about where are you going and how do I help you get there? Because to your point, the people who are really excellent don't stay in the same seat forever. Right? They're like always thinking about where they're going. We do have some like internal paths for growth and advancement that we're just starting to uncover and create for folks who want to build more of a career at MyVARocks. But I'm having conversations about, okay, what is the other thing? Why are you needing remote flexible work? Is it because you are caregiving? We have a lot of caregivers. So if that's the case, great. How do we support you in that? But many times it's, I have a business. We have a couple of entrepreneurs whose businesses were going gangbusters and then all of a sudden flatlined right around 2020. And so they need something that will, frankly, it's a huge advantage that everybody can close their laptop at the end of the day and not think about the work that they do for us. But it's very different from like a corporate all-encompassing, you eat, sleep, and breathe the business problems. We say all the time, like, listen, we are not curing cancer. So, no one's grandmother is going to be pulled off of life support because we didn't do a thing in 30 seconds. So for the most part, unless they have specifically designed their lives this way, we don't work on the weekends, we don't work at night. It's a good thing to be able to close your laptop. So they're pushing something forward. I'm helping in whatever way that I can by making introductions or focusing on, we have a graphic designer and a copywriter that I'm working pretty actively with to make sure that their portfolios are looking amazing and have some really great examples and some really good clients with big cachet. So, and I think that's really fun for me, right? Like it should be fun for women to help other women get where they're going and push their careers forward. And so that's a big part of it for us.
It's so great that you exist. Like it's so great that this exists as a thing. And I was looking at the little intake that we have you fill out, and you put on here that your whole ass being a parent and a business owner, which is obvi, but that you half-ass your health and your friendships. And I don't think that that's unique to you. I think that's an overall problem, and I'm sure it's interesting. It's like how you can't do your own, like brain surgeons can't do their own brain surgery. Like, your own shit kind of falls apart in the process. And it's like, I relate to that pretty hard. And I have to assume that most people who are listening can also relate to that. And I guess, how, like, do you have a VA for your VA for your VA?
Like, I do. Yeah.
Like, how do you
now I have a team of two, and I have VAs help me with my commitments to the Girl Scouts, to my Rotary Club. I have someone who handwrites my notes and I type them out, right? Like it's still my sentiment, but someone else goes in and like has stamps and cards. And so I really delegate quite a lot, but people, I do a lot, right? Like I have a couple businesses, I wrote a book. I'm like always like up to something interesting. And so it's very common for someone to say like, I don't know, that's pretty impressive that you're getting all of this done. And of course, the real answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But depending on my mood, I will say like, oh, well, I have lots of help. It's not that bad. Or one of my favorites is like, oh, I skipped the gym. Like I don't watch TV and I skip the gym. You would get a lot done too if that was the case for you.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, it's like somewhere in the middle that the truth really lies. But yeah, I'm the actual worst. I have like, it's a pandemic thing for me. I was like, doing so well. And then also, Mary, a like fat 40-year-old should not go log rolling, but I did not take any of that into consideration. So I tore my ACL too. Log rolling.
You tore your ACL log rolling, like
Yeah.
on like just going down a hill with your kids.
No. Log rolling is like this weird Wisconsin sport. I'm not sure you can go to the Olympics for it, but you can like get a sponsorship for it. Obviously, that's not the kind of log rolling that I'm doing, but it's a log covered in carpet in a lake. And you hop up on one end. You'll Google it later and it will make slightly more sense, but you hop up on the log and you try to get your opponent off by spinning it with your feet. So you're like stepping really quickly.
Like you're standing on it like it's Scooby-Doo?
Yes.
Like you're just
exactly.
like you're just standing on the log running or walking in one direction.
Yep. Yeah. And you're trying to like get the other person unstable enough that they fall in the water.
And you're balancing?
Yeah. It's a real, I mean, I don't know who came up with this. They were drunk.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Because I tore my ACL skiing, which seems...
Oh, that's very bougie. I love that.
Less more fun than doing it log rolling. It was not fun. It was terrifying. I'm back skiing again, but it was a terrible. Anyway, so you tore your ACL log rolling, a sport that only happens in Wisconsin. And when did you? How long ago did you tear it?
Like last summer.
Did you get a surgery?
No, I'm not. I'll have surgery. I'll have surgery in the spring. The options for surgery are so weird. And at some point, a doctor was telling me, like, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. You really don't need to have that repaired as long as you don't move side to side.
That's what my doctor said to me. And I'm like, so we're going to do surgery now, immediately. Like I tore it on like the 30th of March and I had surgery on April 16th. Like
gosh.
I wasn't good. I mean, I have to stand forever with my job. I can't I can't just not be able to do lateral moves.
Yeah.
It's not an option for me.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you still managed to have fun though, in spite of the fact that you tore your ACL.
For sure. But anyway, my point was I was really active and now I'm not. And that's a place that I am half-assing. And then for a long time, I felt like my friendships in particular are fairly performative. And it is really hard to be a successful woman because you have this, right? You always have the facade and you always have the yep, I'm fine. I'm doing great. And there are across the board for women of a certain level, it's really hard to find a safe place to be like, oh, actually, the whole thing is a shit show and I'm miserable today. Mm-hmm. And that may be totally different tomorrow, but the space to be able to say that, I think that's I don't think I invented that, to your point.
No, and I do believe, I mean, along that same point, it's an amazing point. I think it's why I feel like I have some of my more like meaningful relationships within my entrepreneur community, because the only people who can really understand your problems are other entrepreneurs. Like nobody, like whenever I try to complain about work, about the things I complain, it's always like, wah, wah, wah. Aren't you lucky to have that as your problem? It's like, my problems are just my problems. Like you've got problems that I, like, yeah, it's like, because we don't have a boss, quote unquote, like, because no one else is telling us like we have to do it, that somehow makes it better. And it's like, or makes it easier or cooler or funner or more nice. And it's like, well, no, I mean, I have to come up with all the gumption. The gumption's right. All self-manifested. And also I have 80 million bosses.
Indeed.
I have so many, I have more bosses.
All the bosses.
I have more bosses than the one that you have. So, it's like I have my clients. I have my DJs clients. My DJs are my bosses. Like they don't see it that way, but I do. Whether they want to believe it or not. Like I am nothing without my employees, right? So like you have to kind of think of it in a different way than you can't imagine until you've been in these shoes. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. And then like payroll pressure. I remember the main concern I have always had is that I won't be able to make payroll one week. And that's been the case from the beginning. And I remember having to have a conversation with my husband who, he is very patient, but he has a security gland that needs to be addressed every once in a while. And at the time we had this discussion, it was a new business. And I had promised him that I would not lose focus on my consulting business, that it would just be a side hustle. And the conversation that I needed to have with him was, so at some point, possible that I will need to take money out of our house in order to make payroll. And I need you to be prepared for that. And luckily, he is an actual real life saint because he said, oh, yeah, I know. I understand.
Did you have to do that?
No, I've never had to do that.
But you have a net there.
Yeah, right.
And it's funny that you should say that because I mentioned that on one of my podcasts a long while back was that I had this badge of courage that I've always been able to make payroll. Like I've never not made payroll. Yeah. And I had like 4 or 5 different people who own businesses and they're like, okay, I'm really glad you said that because I've always been I'm really proud that I also have always made payroll, or I always felt shitty whenever I couldn't make payroll. Yeah. And I thought that it was just a me problem. And it's like, no, this is a normal thing that happens in all businesses, I think. But somehow you and I managed to make it out without having. But I mean, does that mean I don't make mistakes on payroll? No, I do sometimes make mistakes on payroll and like underpay or overpay, or usually I'm underpaying. I very rarely overpay people. But if I do underpay them, I mean, I'll always correct it, but I think it's actually a badge of courage to be able to do that.
For sure.
So we've hit an hour. We got to wrap things up here. I feel like we've kind of been all over the place.
Mary, it felt like 7 minutes. You are the absolute coolest. And I am so honored, first of all, to know you.
I mean, it goes right back at you.
Thanks.
Full disclosure, I just recently hired one of Ashley's amazing VAs. So I'm not only a interviewer, I'm also a customer. I'm like the Men's Warehouse here. It has been amazing having you here. Is there anything else you want to wedge in here before we bid adieu?
Oh my goodness. Everybody should go on Amazon and buy my book or listen to the audiobook. And
what's it called?
It's Executive Motherhood, The Art of Having It All Without Doing It All. And, we deal with some like really serious feminist topics, but I promise it is super funny. And I refer to my husband's butt all the time. So
is it a good butt?
It's such a good butt. It's the best butt. You
want your husband to have a good butt. My husband also has a great, great butt.
Yay for husbands and their excellent butts. I think the spouse that you pick is so critical to your success. And I will absolutely go on record as like, if that's not a supportive person, you're better off being alone. Like, yeah. And I like really, really lucked out because not only is he ruthlessly handsome and willing to stay at home with our kids, but he's a supportive, smart, funny, handsome human.
And he's got a pretty good squat game.
Yeah.
For the butt.
Right. And it really is a talent to be working from home and to sexually harass your only coworker as much as I do.
Yeah, HR ain't got nothing on that.
No. Heaven forbid we actually get an HR company.
Ooh. Or maybe when your kids will grow up to be an HR person and you guys can be their first client.
I'm going to need to just take a couple of dollars out of every 100 and put it towards a therapy fund.
Excellent. Well, all of Ashley's, so it's MyVA.rocks, and then we will have links to her book and all the ways you can find her in our show notes. Thank you so much, Ashley Quinto Powell.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to All Up in My Lady Business. It is written by me, Mary Nisi. It is produced by Christina Sorum-Williams and Amelia Ruby with Softer Sounds. It is recorded at the Toast and Jam offices in Logan Square in Chicago. You can find resources and links from this episode in the show notes at allupinmyladybusiness.com. If you enjoyed this episode, and you did, smash that subscribe button. And if you're the kind of person that reviews things on the internet, please rate and review us wherever you listen to us. It really does help people find us. Follow us on all of your socials, and don't forget, whatever you do this week, do it with your whole ass. Thanks for listening.